Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
New reports today, he hiked the price for spending New Year's Eve with Trump, doubled fees at Mar-a-Lago as soon as he won the election, and revenue there followed, spiking by $7 million. I'm joined by former Governor DNC Chair Howard Dean, Richard Painter, an ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush, who's suing Trump over these issues, and Leo Wright-Rigueur, a Harvard professor. Richard Painter, this is not normal. It might be legal. Is it ethical?
Well, it's normal for Donald Trump. This is what he's been doing since day one. It's about self-promotion and promotion of his businesses. He's just flat out wrong when he says that the president cannot have a conflict of interest situation. He can. There's one particular criminal statute that does not apply to the president and the vice president, but other laws apply, including the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution that prohibits foreign government money from coming to the president of the United States, and the bribery and gratuity statutes and other provisions. And what he's doing here is making a lot of money off the presidency. It's not just the $600. The people invited to that party are either members of Mar-a-Lago or they're guests and friends of members of Mar-a-Lago who paid $200,000 to join Mar-a-Lago. I believe they doubled that as soon as he was elected president.
They did.
So the bottom line is a lot of rich people are hanging around the president, enjoying their tax cut because they got the lion's share of the tax cut while the rest of us are stuck with the $2 trillion in debt. And I hope they have a good New Year's Eve celebrating.
Well, Governor Dean, I wish everyone a happy New Year's. I'll read the quote on the screen. The Trump ethics czar said, well, this is a totally, quote, normal business New Year's Eve party, to which every normal person would say, what do you mean, normal business New Year's Eve? Most people don't look at it as a chance to auction off access. Let me show one other stat for your analysis, because Donald Trump talked a lot of smack about vacations. Here's his vacationing during the first year, as according to Travel, which I think shows two things. I'm curious what you think. Number one, he doesn't work a lot. If you don't want him to be effective, maybe you welcome that. But number two, he's constantly vacationing to promote his own properties.
Well, the promotion is extraordinary. There hasn't been a president in my lifetime that's done anything like this. And, you know, at the beginning, the constitutional business about the Emoluments Clause, which is you're not supposed to take foreign money to influence your policy, it didn't bother me. I thought it was a far-flung argument. I'm not an attorney. It's pretty clear that he is shaking down foreign governments, or his staff is shaking down foreign governments who have moved their events to his hotel in Washington at somebody's bequest in order to get favors. This guy, I've said for a long time, I think he's running a criminal enterprise out of the White House, and I think that's what Bob Mueller's on the track of.
And you look at this as a part of that?
I do, absolutely look at it. He's shaking down people. For him to... Also, look what the bill did. The bill, basically, there were 14 Republican senators who voted for a bill that made them between $1 million and $35 million apiece, put in by Orrin Hatch, a clause put in by Orrin Hatch, the chairman of the Finance Committee, who himself benefited from the bill. That is crookedness. Right. That is crookedness. That can't be legal. In the Senate in Vermont, you're supposed to excuse yourself from voting on bills like that, and people do, both Republicans and Democrats. This system is broken. The Republicans are the party of corruption.
So, Professor Rigueur, for the wider view that you often bring us, what happens when you have this sort of situation? And it is unprecedented. And no other president, tried to run a business out of the White House. You could technically have a law firm or give paid speeches in theory, although it's a terrible idea that no one's pursued. What happens to our political and civic life when this just goes on year after year with Donald Trump?
Right. Well, it goes up in flames. The White House clearly had a very loose relationship with ethics. What they have a very close relationship with is money. And, to put it in terms that our audience can understand, the motto of the White House seems to be cash rules everything around me. And the people that are on the hook for it are the taxpayers. Dollar bills. So the people that are on the hook for it are the taxpayers. And what happens is they look around and they say, why isn't Congress doing anything about this? Why aren't politicians? Why is this happening? Why are the American people getting fleeced? It increases polarization. It increases partisanship. And really, it's part of what we see as the breakdown of modern democracy. It's not good.
Richard Painter, what do you say to people at the end of this year who may follow you, who may agree with you, but who feel then dispirited because it seems like they're getting away with it?
Well, we should have focused on this before the election. People had bothered to find out who Donald Trump was. I was practicing law in New York 25 years ago, and he ripped off a lot of people in town. Nobody trusted him, and that's why he's borrowing his money overseas. And that's why we want to find out whether any of that's from foreign governments. And I hope Bob Mueller's on that as well. But we don't, he's not a trustworthy person. He's been lying since the day one in the White House. So at this point, we got to figure out how to get rid of him, because I don't think he's going to change. We've given him a year, and it's not working out. He's been obstructing justice. He's been lying to the American people, trying to shut down the press. And this attack on CNN, I know they're your rival, but going after CNN and then going after that antitrust case against AT&T Time Warner, really to retaliate against CNN, that's unconscionable. That's the kind of thing that happens in a dictatorship. So we're going to have to get rid of him if we want to keep our democracy. There are no two ways about it.
It is Thursday, December 28th of 2017, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your Chef de Cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special today is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. It might be a little spicy, with a kind of a Cajun flavor, possibly. Well, that was a bit of a longer clip than I would normally use here at the top by Ari Melber and the MSNBC panel of Richard Painter, Howard Dean, and a Harvard University professor whose name, sadly, I forgot. I apologize. I did include it, even though it was lengthy, because, well, I just thought, since it's the season and it's about a New Year's Eve party, I have to admit, I think in college we had a party where we took some donation at the door, to pay for the keg or whatever. And even I have to say, I never took part in a party after that. Now, on the other hand, I did work in the hospitality business and I took money to throw parties, but I wasn't really partying at the time. I was working. So a little bit different. I suppose in the rarefied climes that Trump moves about in, people are a little confused about his golfing. He said he was on Tuesday, he'd be back to work. Well, no one noticed he didn't do any golfing over the holidays. To him, golf is work. So when he said he'd be back to work on Tuesday, he'd be back shooting 9 holes by 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. Then the other 9 holes, however long that takes. And it usually takes quite a while for a Trump golf game to complete for all the mulligans the guy has to take. And what's a mulligan? It's a fudge. It's you didn't quite hit the ball where you needed it, and you take another swing and get it to where you want it. That's a mulligan. And Trump is, I would say the master of the mulligan. All righty. Well, let's take a look at what we will be attending to today in the Front Cafe. And that is, we're going to examine the cyber attack that targeted the safety systems at Saudi Aramco. Jailed Russian hacker Konstantin Kozlovsky said that the FSB ordered him to hack the DNC in 2016, and he left a digital signature to prove it. And Robert Mueller hauls in RNC staffers in the Russia probe while Trump fumes over the investigation. And when I say fume, it's rather toxic. Yes, indeed. After the break, of course, we move to the chef's table, and today we'll have an inquiry in why the small Montana town of Whitefish, with its hotbed of far-right white supremacist activity, is intricately linked to the Trump White House. And a drug developed for Alzheimer's patients is found to repair cavities and regrow teeth. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Alrighty, as we're settling in here at the Front Cafe in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, if you would check the menu on your device, and the menu being our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will find at the bottom of the homepage to the rightish is the chat room link, and Roaring Girl monitors that quite frequently during the day, and that's a good way to get a hold of Netroots Radio. And to the leftish are the donate contribute buttons. Of course, that is how we pay the bills, and we appreciate your generosity. Thank you very much. You can contact me at Justice Putnam on Twitter, also Justice Putnam on Daily Coz. How about that? Okay, and I am working, as I said previously, diligently working on getting podcasts on a platform. So West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be available for those who are unable to listen to the show in this time period. So I'm hoping to have that up by next week. So look forward to that. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get into these first dishes that we have prepared for you. And this first one is out of Foreign Policy magazine by Elias Grohl. Malicious software attacked a safety system in August at Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil company, in what is the first ever example of malware targeting the computer systems designed to prevent a disaster at an industrial facility. The attack was first described by the computer security firm FireEye in a blog post last week, which did not name the victim of the attack, but a confidential report obtained by Foreign Policy magazine and authored by Area 1 Security, a computer security firm founded by veterans of the U.S. National Security Agency, identifies Aramco as the victim of the attack. In a statement, Aramco, Saudi Arabia's national oil company and a pillar of its economy, denied the attack took place. Their statement said Saudi Aramco corporate and plant networks were not part of any cybersecurity attack or breach. Well, of course not. And they don't violate human rights either, and they'll tell you over and over and over. The revelation that Aramco was targeted by malicious hackers comes as the company prepares for what will likely be the largest initial public offering of all time. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has staked the company's IPO as the centerpiece of a sweeping reform plan which seeks to diversify the economy and use the windfall from the sale to underwrite an ambitious modernization effort. They're going to build gigantic skyscrapers with, I don't know, maybe Mount Everest in it, so that it'll all be climate controlled so that people can attempt to scale Mount Everest in Saudi Arabia, at the Saudi Arabia facility. It'll be so wonderful. Oh, human rights? That's not the kind of modernization they're talking about. Let's be clear. Area 1's assessment of the attack on Aramco identifies Iran as the likely perpetrator, but other computer security experts who have examined the incident caution against prematurely assigning responsibility because it might be some 400-pound guy sitting on his bed in Macedonia. I mean, it could be, you know. This is probably one of the most difficult attribution cases that I've ever looked at, said one former American intelligence official familiar with the incident. The Area 1 report, which paints a complex picture of the malware dubbed Triton, does not contain hard evidence to implicate Iran in the attack on Aramco, though the first of its kind to directly attack the safety systems of a critical infrastructure facility. The Triton malware was ultimately a failure. Whew, good thing. According to FireEye, Triton attacked a safety system known as Triconex, which is manufactured by the German firm Schneider Electric. Triconex is used all over the world and provides an emergency shutdown function. Triton attempted to alter one of those safety controllers, which resulted in the controller shutting down, an unspecified industrial process. The shutdown prompted Aramco to investigate and discover the Triton malware. Analysts for Area 1 speculate in their report that the malware could have been the product of collaboration between, I told you, Russia, some 400-pound guy contracted by Russia sitting on his bed in Macedonia. Could have been a collaboration between Russia and Iran. While hackers working on behalf of Iran are considered sophisticated, Russia is regarded as more advanced and has carried out cutting-edge operations that have twice resulted in widespread power outages in the Ukraine. The Triton malware contains an artifact, a Russian name, that could point to its authorship. The Area 1 report speculates that Russia expertise could have aided the operation, but acknowledges that these artifacts could also be false flags to cast blame on Russia, which has a history of carrying out attacks on critical infrastructure. Oh, you mean the implication could be that one of our guys did it, sort of like a swordfish scenario? Remember that movie? Yeah, that movie actually was going to come out right around when 9/11 happened, and they had to pull it because, it was a little too weird. All right, this second course being delivered here to the Front Cafe is by Kevin Hall out of McClatchy. A jailed Russian who says he hacked into the DNC computers on the Kremlin's orders to steal emails released during the 2016 U.S. presidential election campaign now claims he left behind a data signature to prove his assertion. In an interview with Russia's RAIN television channel made public on Wednesday, that was yesterday, Konstantin Kozlovsky provided further details about what he said was a hacking operation led by the Russian intelligence agency, known by its initials, FSB. Among them, Kozlovsky said he worked with the FSB to develop computer viruses, or is that viruses? Viruses that were first tested on large, unsuspecting Russian companies, such as the oil giant Rosneft, later turning them loose on multinational corporations. Now, Kozlovsky first came to public attention in early December when word spread about his confession last August 15th in a Russian courtroom that he was the person who hacked into DNC computers on behalf of Russian intelligence. Kozlovsky was jailed earlier this year, alleged to have been part of a hacking group that stole more than $50 million from Russian bank accounts through what's called the Lurk computer virus. Unleash unsuspecting viruses on Russian companies and see how it works under the auspices of an intelligence operation. Okay? And then when you fine-tune the operation and then unleash it on multinational corporations. You also, maybe in tandem or after or before, you've had the same group working on a computer virus that could attack banks. And now, plausible deniability was this guy wasn't working for Russian intelligence. He was a 400-pound guy sitting on his bed in Macedonia. Well, the alleged hacker posted to his Facebook page in December a transcript and an audio recording of his confession during a pretrial court hearing. He also confessed online to having hacked investigators looking into the crash of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, brought down in July of 2014 by a missile near the disputed Ukrainian border with Russia. In written answers from jail made public yesterday by Rain TV, a Moscow-based independent TV station that has repeatedly run afoul of the Kremlin, Kozlovsky said he feared his minders might turn on him and planted a poison pill during the DNC attack. Well, that's what they do. This is like a movie. Wow. It is a movie. I should mention that Navalny, the only viable candidate to run against Putin, it has been, you probably heard, has been deemed ineligible to run because of a fraud conviction in some timber futures several years back, which is questionable too, how they can get you, they being, the Russian authorities. If they don't want you around, they can figure a way of getting rid of you. And sometimes it's convenient heart attacks, and sometimes it's just throwing you in a gulag. Okay. In written answers from jail made public, he said that he placed a string of numbers that are his Russian passport number and the number of his visa to visit the Caribbean island of Saint Martin in a hidden DAT file, which is a generic data file. The allegation is difficult to prove, partly because of the limited universe of people who have seen the details of the hack. The DNC initially did not share information with the FBI, instead hiring a tech firm called CrowdStrike, run by a former FBI cyber leader. That company has said it discovered the Russian hand in the hacking, but had no immediate comment on the claim by Kozlovsky that he planted an identifier. The newest allegations are potentially significant. If the FSB did in fact direct Kozlovsky, then it debunks Putin's assertion that his government had nothing to do with the hacking that all major U.S. intelligence agencies put at his feet. It also calls into question the view of a hack that was conducted as a closely held, organized FSB campaign directed from central offices. I want to back up a little bit here. One of the reasons that this, when it was discovered, it wasn't Hillary Clinton that held back the information of this hacking and then hiring CrowdStrike instead of going to the FBI. The tech guy that they hired contacted and contracted CrowdStrike to look into it. And then when they found out that what was going on, he was just doing his job. He didn't know, something's going on. He doesn't know it's the Russians, right? So he hires a firm to look into it, like we all would. Kozlovsky says he worked largely from home with little knowledge of others, and that the political hack was part of a larger relationship with the FSB's top cyber officials on viruses directed at other countries and the private sector. Now this puts a little bit of an exclamation point on what I mentioned earlier about the melding of government and criminal activity and how it can be used for or against you. Based on my experience and understanding of professional intelligence operations, the blending of criminal activity with sanctioned intelligence operation is an old page out of the Russian intelligence services playbook, says Leo Tadeo, Chief Information Security Officer for Sixtera Technologies and a former head of cyber operations in the FBI's New York office. With the defendant in Russia, what the defendant in Russia is describing would not be inconsistent with past Russian intelligence operations. I would say this is sort of like a chicken and egg question. Which came first? The blending of criminal and intelligence operations by the Russians? Or the Americans blending intelligence and criminal activity? I don't know. Which came first? Maybe they came out together. That can happen. Because we are not immune from it either. We do criminal activities quite often under the auspices of our intelligence, and maybe so. Okay, so the jailed Kozlovsky claims include an assertion that for the past 7 years he was under the control of Major General Dmitry Dukashayev, who he said gave him orders to breach the DNC servers and interfere in the U.S. election process. A federal court in San Francisco in February issued an arrest warrant for Dukashayev for his alleged role in a hack of Yahoo accounts. A month later, the FBI put the former hacker turned spy on a wanted poster for his role in directing hackers. He was arrested in Russia in late 2016 on treason charges in a high-profile incident that included the arrest of another FSB cyber leader. They came right in and just gagged these guys. They put hoods over their heads, gagged them, dragged them out. That's how they do it. And, they get you to work for them, and now it's treason. It's a convenient treason charge. All right, last course here at the Front Cafe before we move back to the chef's table is by Carolyn Orr out of Share Blue Media. As Donald Trump tweets furiously about the ongoing Russia probe, Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his team of investigators are not just carrying on, they are stepping it up. According to Yahoo News reporter Michael Isikoff, Mueller's team recently started questioning Republican National Committee staffers who worked on the Trump campaign's data operation, which was managed by Jared Kushner and directed by Brad Parscale in coordination with the RNC. Investigators want to determine if the joint RNC-Trump campaign data operation was related to the activities of Russian trolls and bots aimed at influencing the American electorate. Now, that's Isikoff citing two anonymous sources familiar with the investigation. Mueller's focus on the data operation signals that the investigation is moving even higher up in the chain of command and broadening its scope to include the National Republican Party. They may be following the digital signals, and they may just find a trove of rubles left in a path also that they can follow. Mueller's team has already questioned several key figures involved in both the RNC and the Trump campaign, including Trump's former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, who ran the RNC before joining Trump's team, as well as former press secretary Sean Spicer, who served as the RNC's communications director and chief strategist, often hiding behind bushes and hedges in the White House. There's pictures of him. It became a whole meme. The RNC played a key role in the Trump's campaign data operation. After Trump was nominated as the GOP presidential candidate in July of 2016, the RNC supplied the campaign with mass amounts of data on voter turnout and other digital strategies, including voter targeting in battleground states. Between 2012 and 2016, the Republican Party invested more than $100 million to construct and refine its data capabilities, and Trump was the beneficiary of that investment. The party's involvement has now put it in the crosshairs of Mueller's investigation. The new line of inquiry also puts the spotlight on Kushner, who was already being questioned about his financial history, his contacts with Russian officials, including Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. As the head of the Trump campaign's data operations, Kushner brought in data firm Cambridge Analytica to help with micro-targeting strategies. Now, investigators want to know if Cambridge Analytica served as a link between the RNC Trump campaign data operation and Russia. This has apparently spooked Kushner. As Isikoff reported, Kushner's legal team recently started looking for a crisis public relations firm. Well, a move often made by people who believe they may be facing criminal charges. The news comes as another sign that the Russia probe will not be ending anytime soon, despite the claims made by Trump and his lawyers. Whether or not this new line of questioning leads to more indictments, it all but guarantees the Mueller investigation will stretch on for months, if not years. Try as he might, Trump cannot tweet his way out of this one. There is a little thing called martial law. Well, that's for another discussion at another day, because right now we're going to go to our break, clean up the front cafe, get the chef table all set up, and we'll meet you there for some more enlightening conversation. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Let's talk about two daily essentials, breakfast and, of course, beer. Mass marketers of breakfast cereals have been in a downward sales spiral for about a decade, so they're pitching their products as health food, hoping to woo millennials who want cereals with natural ingredients and no artificial additives. Some brands are seeking good-for-you credibility by buying out organic brands, such as Kashi, consumed by Kellogg's. But the shift of this $10 billion market to healthier alternatives is, in fact, an enormous grassroots victory, driven by the organic movement, public interest groups, fearless nutritionists, and especially by countless moms, dads, and kids who simply refused to swallow the industry's crap. Now, beer. Last year, Anheuser-Busch InBev mounted a multi-million-dollar coup on America. Not on our country, but on its name. For 6 months, the beer behemoth expropriated our nation's name for a tacky advertising campaign, rebranding its Budweiser product America. But the PR ploy backfired when a flurry of stinging media stories pointed out that Bud is owned by a Brazilian consortium based in Belgium. Undeterred by facts, Big Bud announced that it has invested beaucoup bucks here to improve its beer quality. Mostly, though, that enhancement has come from buying out 10 local craft breweries. AB InBev grabbed these independent brew makers because they represent the real beer of today's America, rapidly taking customers away from the giant purveyor of bland suds. This is Jim Hightower saying, last year the sales of Bud were down by 1/3 from its peak sales year. Meanwhile, craft breweries are gaining market share. Production of their good beer was up 12% last year to 24 million barrels.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Constitution includes several limits on the powers of Congress. For example, Article 1, Section 9 prohibits Congress from suspending the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus except in emergencies. In Latin, habeas corpus means to have the body. A writ of habeas corpus orders government to deliver a person it has arrested to a court of law. Government must explain why that person has been arrested and held. If government cannot show that the person has broken the law, the person must be set free. The Constitution prohibits Congress from passing ex post facto laws. This is a law that makes an act a crime even though the act was legal when it took place. Congress may not pass bills of attainder. This is a legislative act that declared a person guilty of violating the law and set the punishment without a court trial. Congress may not tax anything exported from a state. It may not take money from the Treasury without first passing a law to do so. Finally, Congress may not grant titles of nobility. Article 1, Section 9 also prohibited Congress from banning the slave trade before 1808. Congress promptly banned the importation of slaves on January 1, 1808, but slavery continued until the 13th Amendment was ratified on December 6, 1865. By constraining the powers of Congress, the framers tried to balance the need for a strong government with the need to limit its powers. Those limits were included to make sure that government did not become a threat to the people's rights. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute. Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Article 3 of the Constitution created the U.S. Supreme Court, which has two types of jurisdiction, original and appellate jurisdiction. Jurisdiction means the power or authority to hear cases and make decisions. The U.S. Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in cases involving a state government or an ambassador. Original jurisdiction means that these cases go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. A lower court does not try these cases first. In all other cases, the U.S. Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction. The case is tried first in a lower court. Then the decision of the lower court is appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court may decide whether to hear a case on appeal. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Scientific American's 60 Second Science. I'm Emily Schweng. When you look at satellite images, it's easy to pick out hurricanes, deserts, and the work of a certain semi-aquatic rodent.
And the reason you can see beaver activity from space is because they leave a mark on the landscape.
Ken Tape is an Arctic ecologist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
So they make these ponds, and when a pond forms, my idea was that we could infer if it was a certain kind of pond and we could see a beaver dam, then we could infer that beavers had moved into that area or moved out of that area if it's a beaver pond that's drained.
Tape and a team of other scientists used Landsat satellite images that cover more than 19,000 square kilometers of Arctic tundra in Alaska.
We saw lots of new beaver ponds. I think we saw 56 new beaver ponds formed between 1999 and 2014.
Beavers are considered keystone species, which have an outsized effect on their ecosystem.
And I think it's particularly true in the Arctic because it's underlain by all this frozen ground.
He's talking about permafrost.
And what happens is when you start flooding permafrost areas, permafrost starts to deteriorate, and really the glue that's binding the soil together, that's holding the landscape together, starts to thaw.
Tape and colleagues presented their findings December 11th at the annual conference of the American Geophysical Union. He says the implications of beavers' northward expansion are big.
Imagine that you just dropped 56 groundwater springs into Arctic stream environments, right? A groundwater spring in the Arctic is a rare thing, and it's an oasis of biologic activity for fish spawning and things like that.
Beavers may be following the northward expansion of vegetation onto the tundra.
But the other possible driver is rebound from heavy trapping a century ago.
If they contribute to the deterioration of the permafrost, you could call it coming back with a vengeance. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
This is Scientific American's 60 Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. This will just take a minute. Music includes a lot of repetition. What would your favorite song be without a chorus? But the connection runs even deeper than that, because the very act of repeating something can render that thing melodious, even the sound of a shovel being dragged across the pavement. That's according to a study to be published soon in the journal Music and Science. A few years back, psychologists at the University of California, San Diego discovered that when words or phrases are repeated a few times, they can start to sound more like singing than speaking.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible. But they sometimes behave so strangely, sometimes behave so strangely, sometimes behave so strangely, so strangely, so strangely, so strangely, so strangely.
The effect is perhaps not entirely surprising. Talking and singing are both forms of vocal communication. But researchers got to wondering, could repetition also musicalize other types of sounds? So they collected clips of 20 different environmental sounds, including water dripping, ice cracking, whales calling, and the aforementioned shovel. And they played the snippets to 58 undergraduates, first as single sounds, and then in a series with increasing reiteration. What they found is that as the repeats stacked up, the participants rated the sounds as being more tuneful. The conclusion?
Repetition's power to musicalize seems to extend to a broader variety of sounds than just speech.
Elizabeth Margulis, director of the Music Cognition Lab at the University of Arkansas, who led the study.
These perceptual transformations are powerful because nothing changes in the acoustic signal itself. That is held fixed. Everything that sounds different comes from the mind itself, making these illusions particularly useful for understanding the musical mode of listening. What are we doing when we're hearing something musically? How is this different from other kinds of hearing? These transformations allow us to tackle these kinds of questions head on.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Well, thank you for accompanying us back here to the chef's table. We've broken everything down and cleaned up the front cafe to its original luster as a very sedate and sophisticated cookbook store. And we're now back in the Speakeasy where the fun and games occur. And part of fun and games is weather around the world. And we start off here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, where it is currently 42 degrees. I must say, it is balmy compared to how it used to be. Our nights are only in the low 40s, and we're going to be up to 52 today. I might have to just wear a t-shirt, maybe. Wow. Now, it says that we have a 0% chance of precipitation, but I can attest that the streets are wet. And that may be to what other people around the country would call rain, but here in Oregon, we just call it, it's a mist. And we will be having an increased chance of rain occurring tonight when we do have a low of 40 degrees, and then mostly sunny tomorrow with intermittent chances of rain. And then I think we'll be dry for New Year's and New Year's Eve and New Year's, with then chance of rain coming up on Wednesday. We'll see. All right, well, low pressure is holding at 30.24 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles. Humidity is 83%. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people live around the world. Okay, and of course I need to open up that tab so that I can tell you. Well, it looks like the fellow just outside of London is registering 41 degrees and clear. Paris is 40 degrees and clear, though they do have a continuing wind advisory that may shut down infrastructure. Rome is under the same wind advisory, and they are at 46 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 41 degrees with fog. Kabul is 52 degrees with haze. Hong Kong is 67 and clear. Tokyo is 40 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 70 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and clear. And New York is a bitterly cold 15. And they have a half just to make it seem like it's better than just 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And clear. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. All right, first course here at the chef's table is by Liz Posner out of Alternate. Something fishy is going on in Whitefish, Montana. The small town of 6,500 is one of America's most rural regions, but it has occupied a lot of media space this year. Since the beginning of 2017, the town's name has popped up repeatedly in stories about the far right. Whitefish is the home base for Trump's potential private spy agency, as well as the tiny company contracted to restore power in Puerto Rico. And early in the year, the town drew media attention as the proposed meeting point for an anti-Semitic rally. On the surface, these may not seem related, but on closer examination, all three are clearly linked to the Trump White House. Let's begin with Whitefish Energy. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico and left the island without power, a tiny company based in Whitefish, operating for less than 2 years, was contracted to restore power for a hefty fee of $300 million. The Puerto Rican government opposed the Whitefish Energy deal, and it ultimately fell through, terminating November 30th. And the FBI has since launched an investigation into the contract. Oh, another reason why the FBI is tainted. It is through the Puerto Rico story that many first learned of the Trump administration's ties to Whitefish. Secretary of Interior Ryan Zinke grew up in Whitefish and has personal as well as business ties to the energy group contracted to work in Puerto Rico, leading many to suspect that Zinke had ulterior motives for choosing the firm over larger, more experienced competitors. The Washington Post reported that Whitefish CEO Andy Tekmansky and Zinke are acquainted, but only Zinke's office said in an email, because Whitefish is a small town where everyone knows everybody. Well, certainly they do. Zinke's office said he had no role in Whitefish securing the contract for work in Puerto Rico. It's just one of those weird coincidences, isn't it? Tekmansky also said that Zinke was not involved. Oh, no, not involved. We did it on ourselves. But they probably wouldn't have thought that they could get anywhere, except, there was a particular party in power. All right. Special favors among powerful business owners and local politicians, while unethical, are not anything new. And once the relationship between Zinke and Whitefish Energy was revealed in full, Puerto Rican officials called for the contract to be voided. Actually, the company continued work through November until it claimed it was owed over $80 million in fees by the government. According to Slate, under the contract, subcontractors made as much as $462 per hour, racking up high costs, which was already billions in debt before the hurricane struck. Okay. I have to say the subcontractors weren't getting paid $465 per hour. Let's be clear. Maybe 12. Nah, give them 40. Give them 60. $60 per hour. They go, oh man, I'm making plumber wages. Plumbers go, I'm making 130. Where have you been? But that was not the last that we would hear of Whitefish, Montana. Most recently, BuzzFeed reported that Trump was considering launching a new intelligence agency that some are calling a private CIA. Oh, you mean a Gestapo? Come on, just come on, say it. The Mentor Group, the company that submitted the proposal, is a private contractor that provides intelligence and militia manpower to governments and corporations and is based in Whitefish. Oh, mercenary Gestapo. I don't know. A mentor doesn't quite. Just come out and say it. We're I don't know. Mercenaries. A mentor. Well, maybe they should just say that. Oh, well, of course, in addition to Zinke's ties to Whitefish Energy, a mentor has an advocate close to the president. Eric Prince. Oh, a mentor is Eric Prince's, Eric Prince. Okay. So he's moved on from Z. He's no longer Z. Of course, I thought Eric Prince was still in one of the Gulf states because there's a warrant out for his arrest here in the United States. But he's working for Trump, so I guess it's all okay. It's his own little Blackwater. All right. Of course, remember that Prince is the brother of Betsy DeVos, education secretary, married into the Amway fortune. Simmering beneath these suspicious White House deals is the well-documented tradition of white supremacy and neo-Nazism in the town of Whitefish. The town is home to white supremacist leader Richard Spencer and Chuck Baldwin, a radical right extremist minister who preaches Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and homophobia, among other strains of hate. BuzzFeed News looked into the remarkable growth of white supremacism in this isolated region and explained the trend of neo-Nazis moving to the area as follows. Flathead County, population 9,600, is one of the whitest places in the nation at 95.2%. There are other allures for people at odds with mainstream American culture: large pockets of open space, the ability to live off the grid, the lack of restriction when it comes to gun ownership, the Montana political ethos, some mix of libertarian, conservative, and don't F with me, is inviting that way. As a local pastor put it, it's a place where people can feel safe when they say outrageous things. Yeah, but don't go in there and say Black Lives Matter. You don't be that outrageous. Trust me. Or say that you don't want neo-Nazis marching in your town and harassing Jewish residents. That's just a little too outrageous for the community to bear. And they've made Jewish residents there know that it's too much for them to bear. Okay, though the Whitefish city government has repeatedly denounced Spencer and his presence in their town, the mayor said in a public statement last year, the city of Whitefish repudiates the ideas and ideology of the founder of the so-called alt-right as a direct affront to our community's core values and principles. The city of Whitefish rejects racism and bigotry in all its forms and expressions. We need tourists. So come on, don't tell people there's a shark in the water. The wave of right-wing hate in Whitefish is also connected to Trump's cabinet. Here again, Interior Secretary Zinke's name emerges. Last year, a report on Zinke's connections to white supremacists in Whitefish and the surrounding area. That was reported by Raw Story. Zinke endorsed a white nationalist candidate from Montana State House in 2016 who ended up losing, but later thanked Zinke for helping him appear more mainstream. And this year, journalist Wayne Madsen reported that Zinke's two sons were friends of former Whitefish resident Richard Spencer. You know, the neo-Nazi. Alt-right is just a nice way of saying neo-Nazi, which is, I guess, also a nice way of saying MF and Nazi. All right. In case your head is spinning, here's a recap. Whitefish Energy CEO knows Zinke. Zinke served in the same elite military branch as Eric Prince, who is now pushing Trump to contract a private militia based in Whitefish, which has emerged as a white nationalist hotbed in recent years, and was the setting for a personal relationship between far-right extremists and Zinke's own family. So much for the excuse that Whitefish is just a small town where everyone knows everybody. There are too many suspicious ties for Zinke's PR team to get away with, and it smells pretty fishy. Yeah, well, anytime you want to name it Whitefish, you know it's going to smell to high heaven, and it does. Okay, well, here's something a little sweet to linger in your mouth for a little bit. You know, I always like happy stories. Lysergic dimethylate acid, LSD, first was a paper product. Or a byproduct of paper, and they discovered this and used it for, well, some people thought beneficial purposes. So scientists, in their research into trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, or at least medication so that people can, well, regardless, in their research of Alzheimer's, discovered that a drug that they have developed has a way of stimulating cells in the pulp of teeth, promoting new dentine production and natural tooth repair. And this is by Kara Lant from the World Economic Forum. Research papers are published there. Okay, well, dental fillings may soon be left in the ash heap of history thanks to a recent discovery about a drug called tidaglosib, developed for and trialed to treat Alzheimer's disease. The drug also happens to promote the natural tooth regrowth mechanism, allowing the tooth to repair cavities. Well, this is getting so close to the lizard gene behavior that I've always wanted, so that I could grow new cartilages in my joints. Oh, which I should mention, my surgeon said I'm way past. Even if they could develop the lizard gene to repair new meniscus, I'm way past that. So, I did go to the doctor yesterday. I know I'm violating my own HIPAA disclosure, but it's me. I can do that. My doctor, family practice guy, did a bunch of tests and said that I'm boringly healthy. So I consider that to be a good thing. And when we get the ACA back in place and all of its financially secure splendor, really, dental should be part of the plan, as well as, vision. Let's be clear. Now, teeth can naturally regenerate dentine without assistance, but only under certain circumstances. The pulp must be exposed through infections such as decay or trauma to prompt the manufacture of dentine, but even then, the tooth can only regrow a very thin layer naturally. Not enough to repair cavities caused by decay, which are generally deep. But tidaglosib changes this outcome because it turns off the GSK-3 enzyme, which stops dentine from forming. Well, the research team inserted a small biodegradable sponges made of collagen soaked in tidaglosib into cavities. The sponges triggered dentine growth, and within 6 weeks, the damage was repaired. Wow. The collagen structure of the sponges melted away, leaving only the intact tooth. Thus far, the procedure has only been used in mouse teeth. Come on! Yet, as King's College London Dental Institute professor and lead author Paul Sharp told The Telegraph, using a drug that has already been tested in clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease provides a real opportunity to get this dental treatment quickly into clinics. The simplicity of our approach makes it ideal as a clinical dental product for the natural treatment of large cavities by providing both pulp protection and restoring dentine. Yay! Well, we need that. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast day, and it was so wonderful visiting with you here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day. In fact, why don't you do it 24/7, 365? There's some great content going on all the time, as you know. And we will visit with you here tomorrow on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for, well, it will be Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So visit with us tomorrow on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui coulent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.